Hello, John. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
Today's guest is John Douglas, and John is an amazing artist who combines his passion for art and music. He is also an accomplished drummer who used his art skills and began painting and customizing drums and guitars for many of the biggest rock bands. Bands like Aerosmith, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Guns N' Roses, Pantera, Van Halen, and ZZ Top, while writing music and performing with various bands himself. And before we start, John, where can people learn more about you?
Besides a generic Google search, I do have a website, which is creatively enough, johndouglas.com. That's more kind of my online portfolio, but there's a bio and it touches on the music and the fine art and kind of everything in between. So that's a good place to start anyway.
Fantastic. And listeners, please connect with John, and I appreciate if you hit the subscribe and like button for our show. So, John, my goodness, I know I just rattled off some art that you've done for bands in the intro, but these are literally the legends of rock. Maybe let's start with this question. How did you find your love for art and music?
I'm pretty sure based on my memory and probably more what my parents told me, which was drums came first. I was banging on pots and pans way before I could probably even hold a crayon. So I think drums are more primitive, and I think that was my first love. And I'm sure that as soon as I could hold a crayon or pencil, I'm sure I was doodling and drawing. So they really kind of went hand in hand. But I have to say that the music and drums in particular was the driving force for certainly the first half of my life. I was just playing in rock bands, and that's what I wanted to do. And I graduated high school and I went on the road, and I was just pursuing that dream. Now, art goes hand in hand. If you're in a band, well, the first thing you need is a logo. And then you usually have to do show posters or flyers and maybe a backdrop. So maybe you're lucky enough to get t-shirts. And so there's always design and art that go along with any band. So I've always done that. So I took both of them in public school. My electives were always band and art all the way through high school, like I say. And then I've kind of thankfully never had to really choose definitively one or the other. I've always kind of juggled them, and sometimes they meet up in the middle, and I paint actually musical instruments and design things for bands. And to me, that's the ultimate marriage of my two greatest passions.
If I understand you right, you obviously had a passion for music and art. When you graduated, was there any thought about pursuing and furthering your education in art, or you strictly decided, I'm going to be a musician and went that route?
Like I said, the music and drums is it is primal and deeply embedded. And I do think it was my first love. And the upside of especially drums is you don't even have to be good to enjoy it. It's kind of like bowling. You can enjoy bowling and you don't really have to be good. And just the joy of hitting things and making noise is, ideally, obviously you get better and it becomes musical, but that passion runs deep. And and right away, I already forgot what your question was.
Man, my question was, there was no thought about you furthering your education after high school in your art, but instead you decided, I want to be a musician.
Much to my parents' horror, yeah, I really wanted to be a musician. And I can remember teachers and always saying, well, at least you have your art to fall back on, which is like, it used to piss me off so much. But of course, they were right in hindsight. But yeah, again, I think I will always, and still to this day, I'll put a paintbrush down to pick up a drumstick. I'm not always sure that I would do the opposite. If I was in a playing situation, I don't think I'd put the drumstick down to pick up a paintbrush, if that makes sense. I've always done the both, but I just think that playing drums and playing in a band for me is the ultimate. So and I actually had a scholarship for music that I didn't use because I thought, well, I don't want to teach music. I want to play it, rock and roll. I want to go on the road and play. That's what I did. Again, to my parents' horror, and I don't blame them. And that's what I did, and I never turned back. Now, the journey's been a long, interesting one, and it's been had many, many, many challenges and disappointments and pivots along the way, but it's never steered away from primarily music or art, ever.
I know this is obviously a art and creative podcast, and although you have an amazing music history, let me ask this because it's coming from a place of curiosity, and I'll make a sports analogy. Let's choose basketball, for instance. If you come out a prestigious basketball school, great basketball program, you're going to make it to the NBA. And out of just curiosity, I don't know anything about the music scene. Getting out of high school, how does one know if you're good enough to play with some of the bands that you've played with? I mean, how can you forecast that?
That's a great question, and I wish I had the answer because I grew up in Houston, Texas, which is, Texas is not the music capital of the world. And we're talking about, the 80s. So it's in Texas, you're going to be in the oil and gas business or agriculture for the most part. And to say out loud to anybody, well, I'm going to be a musician was laughable, I should say, because it's so far fetched. Unlike if you were raised in, let's say, LA or maybe even New York, where in any given neighborhood, probably most of the people in that neighborhood, parents worked somehow in the industry, whether it's TV or movies or music. So it was a very common thing, I think, to be born in Los Angeles or be raised in LA to grow up saying, well, of course I'm going to be an actor, or I'm going to be a musician or a rock star, whatever you want to call it. I don't think it was like, oh yeah, of course. Well, here's, Capitol Records is right down the street, and any given night on a club, you could see tomorrow's superstar. Well, in Texas, that's just not the case. So I was naive is the short answer to your question. That I just knew the passion, the desire, and the drive was such that I couldn't do anything else. I just couldn't fathom doing anything else. And I don't remember ever having a desire to be rich and famous. I just knew my thing was always, I just want to make a living playing music. I'd like to make enough money to not have to worry about making money, because I got to think that most of us creatives are kind of the same. It's like, I'm project driven, not money driven. I wish I was otherwise, because I obviously learned to value money. We have to earn a living. We have to provide for our families and put a roof over our head and eat. And that requires money. But I just was never money motivated, project motivated, whatever that is, painting, drum playing in a band, writing music, whatever. That's who I am.
Through the history of rock and roll, there have been many iconic album covers, as well as art being such a big part of the music industry. Did you think it was actually possible for you to have your creative talent be so accepted by the rock and roll community?
No. And yeah, it's funny that, album covers were so, obviously I'm old enough, I used to buy new records based on the artwork when there were albums, and even when there were CDs, when you could hold the tangible product and that cover art in the backs and the liner notes and stuff, that was pivotal, man. That was like inspirational. And I would buy albums, bands that I've never heard before based on the artwork. And I found a lot of great bands that way. I heard a lot of crap too, but I still enjoyed the art. But what's the question again?
So my question is, you're being accepted now, not just for your skills musically, but artistically. Were you surprised that they were so gravitated by your actual artwork?
Well, that happened quite by accident too. Growing up at home, my favorite thing art-wise was I like to draw people, the figure, the human. That is my greatest passion artistically in artwork. And growing up, it was, to me, the ultimate control of just a sharp pencil on paper, my hand resting on it. And I would draw people, obviously in black and white. And of course, being a teenager and a rock music fan, I would draw my favorite bands. And that was my hobby at home. And then when I got brave enough, I started painting my drums, and, started with the kick drum head with, whatever band name I had. I designed a logo, and then I'd paint the logo on the front kick drum head. So everybody would know who we were. And then I didn't have the money to go buy new drums and have every drum match. I just started with a crappy little 5-piece orange sparkle drum kit. And so when I wanted to add a piece, I couldn't go to the store, and we just didn't have the money to order another orange sparkle drum. So I would just I would get this jelly bean kit. I'd get a red sparkle, another kick drum, or maybe a rack tom that was black or something, whatever I could find cheap at a garage sale or whatever. But aesthetically, the jelly bean drum didn't appeal to me. So pretty soon I was taking apart the drums and painting them. I just wanted my stuff to look cool. I just wanted my drums to look unique, stand out among other drummers. And also it was an expression of who I was. So as I got better at painting my drums and learning what materials to use, because again, this is back way before the internet. And it's like, I just couldn't, it's hard to fathom nowadays. Like, where do you go to there was no YouTube and there's no tutorials anywhere. When I finally found out that they used primarily automotive paint, I went to an auto body shop and they told me where to get the paint, and you go to this paint and they pick up a can of paint, and the only instructions says for professional use only. That's it. So a lot of trial and error on the refinishing part. The artwork was easy. It's just to get it shiny and look like a showroom drum kit that you bought on the floor. That's what I was going for. I wanted my craftsmanship to catch up to my ideas. And so I learned to do that on my stuff. And so pretty soon my drums were looking pretty cool and unique. And I was playing in a band in Houston that got pretty popular. It's a band called XOX. And pretty soon the guys from ZZ Top would come see me play, or my band play, I should say. And soon I met Frank Beard, the drummer of ZZ, and he commented, "Hey, your drums are cool. Who did that?" I did. And he said, "Hey, would you want to paint some drums for me?" And I kind of went, "Well, okay." It was not my intent. It was just, that's how it happened, very organically. And this was, again, this was mid 80s. So ZZ Top was bigger than big, huge all over the planet. They just so happened to live in Houston, where I live. So once ZZ Top was out touring with my drums, then the same thing would happen. Some drummer would see ZZ Top and they'd say, "Hey, Frank, your drums are cool. Who did that?" And he'd give him my name. And then pretty soon before I knew it, I was painting drums for everybody, just word of mouth. Anyway, it's a long story, but that's what kind of got the ball rolling of when I started doing things for famous musicians. Quite by accident. I just wanted my drums to look cool.
That's so cool. And that's going to lead me to my follow-up question there. And you've answered some of it, but when you're customizing and painting a kick drum piece, how do you work with these big bands? I mean, do you do a sketch to show them your idea prior? Do they just trust you to come up with something magnetic and dynamic visually?
Yeah, I'm convinced that the music business keeps FedEx in business because everything is last minute. But every job is different because every drummer is different. And they'll come to me, and some guys will come to me and they know exactly what they want. For instance, there's a huge band out of Mexico called Maná. And I've been painting drums for Maná for 30 years.
Wow.
I don't speak a lick of Spanish. And they're huge. They are as big as U2. They're huge. I don't think I would know anything about them if I wasn't painting drums for them because, again, I don't speak Spanish. But that drummer, his name is Alex, and fortunately he speaks English. And so, for example, he comes and he knows pretty much exactly what he wants. He's got a strong idea. Sometimes it's based off of album cover art that the kind of the tour production is based on. And I mean, and it helps because I am a drummer and I've been in bands my whole life. So I understand a lot of the demands of the business and the drums. And like I said, I am a drummer. So I understand when you paint drums in particular, you paint them when they're all taken apart and they're not like set up. So you have to be able to visualize how's this kit. When I'm painting this one tom, I got to remember, okay, where is this going on the set? Which side is facing what? What's the angle of it? Because I want the drums to make sense when they're set up together. That's how people see it, not individually as a drum sitting on a table being painted. I've got to visualize the whole thing set up, and I want it to look cool. ideally, from 10 rows back. Nowadays, video is standard. At any major concert, there's video and you could see the drums up close. But for the most part, most of the audience is not close up. So you got to think bigger. And, if you're painting for bands that play arenas and stadiums, you got to think bigger. And for me, it's got to work, the drum setup, and it's got to work cohesively with how they are and where they sit on stage. And there's lots of things to think through. And I love that process. And some guys come to me and say, well, I love everything you do. Just do something cool. And I know enough to say, yeah, no, that's not going to work, because the one time I do that, you're not going to think it's cool. I will have painted these drums and deliver them. And, you're going to open the box and say, oh, this is not what I had in mind. So sometimes the process is some back and forth, because most of the time it's done over the phone and email or whatever. We're not in the same room. And when I get the drums, I get them shipped to me here in Texas, and I have to share their vision. If they come to me with a strong idea, then there's got to be enough back and forth for me to get it. So I'm like, okay, I get what you want. I share your vision, and then I run with it. Sometimes, like Frank Beard from ZZ Top, I've painted so many drums for him now. Now he loves to be surprised. I don't tell him any. I make it all up, and I don't send him any photos of the process, and I literally deliver them to the stage, and he loves it that way. Now, it hasn't always been that way, but again, I've been painting drums for him since the 80s, so he leaves it up to me. In the early days, I would throw out an idea, just kind of a broad stroke idea, not really any sketches, and just kind of go for it. So every job is different, and it's an adventure. And the drums, some guys play 5 drums, some guys play 15 drums. So it can be a lot. It's a lot of materials, a lot of work, a lot of elbow grease. There's in the finish process, again, with automotive paints, it's dangerous. It's, you were talking about full face masks, supplied air. You're spraying multiple coats of urethane, and then you're sanding them flat with 1,500 grit sandpaper, and you're buffing them out. And that's just a lot. That's the artwork's the fun part. But I love it. I mean, it's the ultimate combination of art and music for me. Same goes with guitars, kind of the same process. And yeah.
Yeah, that sounds really meticulous. And I'm going to ask this question, and you're obviously part of the music scene and you tour with many of these bands. I'm asking this question because I would assume rock celebrities are careful who they work with. Obviously, you're massively talented, and listeners, stop by his website or his Instagram and you'll understand what I'm saying. But would you say you're getting these awesome projects because of your artistic abilities, which I know there's a lot of great artists out there, or is it because you know the music industry? You can take apart a drum kit and you have proven history of doing this. Is that where it really lies, or is it really both? Is it the connections to these people? Where do you think these opportunities are sprouting from?
Ooh. Probably a combination of all that, truthfully. I mean, I think obviously, you heard how it started. I mean, it started because I painted my drums and I wanted them to look cool, and somebody saw them. And so it never would have happened had I not been a drummer and an artist. So I didn't set out to paint anything for anybody else. It happened quite by accident. I would be on tour with my bands playing shows, and then at night I'd go back to the hotels and I would be painting drums for another band while I was gigging with my band. That's the way I've done it. And I still sometimes have to do that. Now when I paint, I do paint a lot of canvas, way more fine art now than drums. Painting drums is a very, very, very small niche market, which it's not cheap. And not everybody that can afford it wants it, and not everybody that wants it can afford it. And then they have to find me, because it's not like I take out billboards or anything, because again, it's a small market. Strictly word of mouth, repeat business. I have a handful of repeat clients that I've been painting drums for 20 and 30 years for. And every once in a while I get new ones. So anyway, back to my two-dimensional art on canvas. I still to this day, I paint in my hotel room while I'm on tour. So I go into a hotel room and I look for a blank wall, and I carry roll up canvas. I paint unstretched for obvious reasons. and I tape the canvas to the wall, and I carry black paint and I carry white paint and some brushes, and I paint all the time. Even when I'm on tour with any band, whether it's Europe, South America, the United States, doesn't matter. I'm carrying the canvas and I'm painting.
Oh, is that why a lot of your work is in black and white, just because logistically it's easier just to have two colors? Is that what it is?
No, I have trimmed it, my whole rig, my painting thing down to a science of exactly what I need to travel light. But I love black and white. I just always have. Maybe it dates back, to my pencil portrait days of when I was a kid. If I'm bored and I'm channel surfing on the TV, just looking for something to watch, if it's black and white, I'll stop and watch it. I'm just drawn to black and white photography. I love black and white images. I love black and white movies. I love black and white. There's just something about it. And so that's what I choose to paint. And every once in a while, I'll add a splash of color or a red background and the black and white portrait against it, and it really pops and it's contrast. But by and large, man, I am a black and white dude. So even when I'm home, which obviously I've been home now for 15, 16 months of COVID, no tours, no concerts. So even when I'm home, I paint black and white. I mix my paint on a drum head and I paint unstretched, even in my studio here at home. That's because I just learned that way. The few times that I painted on a stretched canvas, I agonized over all the flexing and the move. I hated it. Not used to it. I'm used to it basically like painting on a wall. A canvas is just nailed or taped to a wall. That's what I'm used to. So that's the way I paint.
Wow, that's interesting. And tell me about two specific projects that I would assume are huge projects and priceless experiences in your career. One being your art being used for the cover of Joe Perry's solo album, Have a Guitar Will Travel. And the other one is your painting of John Bon Jovi, who loved your painting that he offered limited prints to his fans.
Yeah.
Tell me how awesome are those experiences? I mean, we're talking about, again, legends of the music industry.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'll tell you this story. And again, I apologize. It's kind of a long one. The Aerosmith story is, I think, a classic example of not so much destiny, but serendipity. And basically, you never know where things will lead. Okay, so way back early, maybe 1992, something like that, I painted a drum kit for ZZ Top, for Frank Beard of ZZ Top. And we didn't have an exact purpose. He said, just what, so I painted the drums white, and I painted, guess what? Black and white portraits of beautiful women. I just went through magazines, any photo that struck my eye. I just painted portraits of, some supermodels, some people I knew, some people I didn't know, just beautiful women all over this great big drum kit. And he plays like 15 drums or something. So a lot of drums, a lot of portraits in black and white. We call it the supermodel kit. And so fast forward, they're going to play David Letterman in 1994, January of 1994. I'm terrible with dates, but for some reason I remember that. Plus, I was, David Letterman fan. He was the king of late night TV and edgy. And so I went with him up to New York, and we're in there. So the ZZ Top is the musical guest. But who was sitting in with the band all week was Joe Perry of Aerosmith. He's playing guitar with the band. They used to do that back then. If you watch that, Letterman had a great band, and they would have guest musicians. Eddie Van Halen did that. I mean, just like the greatest would sit in because the band was so good, and Letterman was, again, cutting edge TV. So Joe Perry is sitting in with the band. I don't remember meeting him. I guess I did. I don't really know. 94, January of 94. So fast forward about 6 years later, around 2000, somehow I'm tracked down by Joe's guitar tech because Joe decided that he wants a portrait of his wife painted on a guitar. And he remembered this drum kit from 6 years earlier, which is pretty incredible. And so somehow his guy tracked me down, and based on that one drum kit. And so I talked with Joe. We batted around some ideas. He sent me a Polaroid photo of his wife that he took, but he loved her smile in this. And so I painted this guitar. They shipped me a raw guitar directly from Gibson, And I had to kind of the whole scheme, we decided to paint it pearl white. So I painted the whole guitar pearl white, and I painted her portrait on the front, and I painted a picture on the back from another Polaroid. And we named the guitar, his wife's name is Billy. And so we named the guitar Billy, and I picked the font and I painted her name on the headstock. And of course, thankfully, he loved it. And so did she, thankfully. So that's been, for me, probably the most iconic thing I'm associated with, because he still uses it everywhere. It's been on the cover of every magazine. He's used it at the Super Bowl. I think he used it on a Gap commercial. It's everywhere. And it's in the Aerosmith Guitar Hero video game. And and he's always been very cool. He always mentioned my name in articles. He has been great to me on that. So not only did I get that cool gig of painting that portrait on that guitar, that introduced me to Aerosmith. So pretty soon I painted not only another couple of guitars for him, but then I painted some drums for Joey Kramer. And so a couple of years later, I always thought, you know what? In my downtime, I want to paint a picture of Joe playing that guitar. Kind of hey, I painted that portrait on that guitar, and then I painted a painting of him playing that guitar. You know what I mean? I just thought that for myself, I thought that would be cool. So I had some time off at home, and I did that. I found cool photos, and I painted this big painting. And I do like to paint large. It was probably about 4 feet by 5 feet, unstretched canvas in color, which is very rare for me. Full color, I exaggerated the colors, almost looked comic book, truthfully, but I liked it. So I contacted his guy, and I said, hey, man, I did this painting of Joe for me, and hoping Joe would sign it for me, just because I'm a fan. And the guy said, sure, I'm up at Joe's house now. FedEx it up here, and I'll make sure Joe signs it for you. Okay, cool. So I FedExed it up there, and Joe saw it and said, that's my album cover. I didn't know it at the time, but he was working
wow.
He was working on his solo album, and he saw the painting and loved it, and called me and said, can I use this for my album cover? So that's exactly how it happened. And of course I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. So that's how that happened. And then you could even fast forward it another 20 years from that, or 19 years, through a bunch of circumstances. I end up playing with Aerosmith, played 35 shows with them, and I played the Grammys with Aerosmith. And all of that leads back to that paint job that I put on the ZZ Top drums, and then his guitar, that led to me ultimately working for Aerosmith, to getting the call that they needed me to fill in on drums. And that's how you could draw the line over, no pun intended, that's an Aerosmith album title, but you can draw the line from 1994 all the way up to me playing drums with Aerosmith on the Grammys in January of 2020. It's a direct line, and art drove that line. Anyway, I know it's a long story, but to me it's a great example of you never know where things could lead you.
Do you have ice water in your veins? Meaning, because these are like situations that if any other human was to be in those opportunities, they might melt. They'd be too afraid to paint, a rock legend's wife. It may not capture her spirit in that painting, all the way to performing with Aerosmith. Pressure that doesn't get to you, does it?
On the playing side, the way it happened, there was just no time for it. I mean, I said yes, and I had to learn the songs, and I had 4 or 5 hours to learn them, and I've never played those songs before. So there was no time, and that's probably a good thing. And now, after I played the very first show, first of all, I think expectations were pretty low from everybody. I don't think anybody knew what to expect, but it didn't go perfectly, but it went very well, better than probably most of us expected. So after that, I remember Joe Perry asking me, or saying something to that effect, ice water, and he used different language, but heard people say, wow, you're crazy to say yes to that thing. And I'm like, I don't know who was crazier, them for letting me do it, because they had no idea whether I could pull it off. It could have been the most embarrassing night of my life, but certainly of their life too. And nowadays, it's like everybody in the crowd is filming it. So it's going to be on YouTube before you're in the shower after the show. There's no hiding anymore. So yeah, I mean, again, I had no time to to think about the potential of disaster, of which there's great. But I've had, on the art aspect of it, I mean, there have been times where I felt like I bit off more than I could chew of a paint job, or I'm in the middle of a portrait and I'll never forget, I was painting. This is another long story, and I hate to drop names on you, but I painted over the course of about 10 years. I probably painted 50 or 60 portraits for Merv Griffin himself. And the very first one I did, he had me paint a portrait of Meg Ryan. At the time, I was painting in my spare bedroom in my house. It was about a 10 by 10 bedroom, small room. And I was painting a big painting, again, 4 by 5. And I painted it, and then you can't get very far away. So I took it out of that room and I took it outside, and I walked away, and I turned around and I was like, oh my gosh, she looks sunburned. She looks horrible. It looks like Meg Ryan, but it looks like she got too close to the sun or went to sleep on the beach. It was like, and I remember thinking, I'm in over my head. I'm going to have to call Merv Griffin and say, man, I'm not your guy. I can't do it, which is a horrifying feeling, just terrible. And I felt that way for, I don't know, maybe an hour, a few minutes, I don't know. And then I took the canvas back into my room, and I thought, well, I got to try to save it. I just can't quit, can't give up. I don't want to make that call. And so I just kept working on it. And ultimately I did it good enough to where I thought, okay, I saved it. Looks good. And I sent it to him, and he loved it. And, again, over the next 10 years, I painted 40, 50, 60 paintings for him. And it was a learning process. I mean, I think I kind of stumbled on my painting technique quite by accident, because I tried to save that one portrait.
That's an amazing story, John. And we are near the end of the show. I just have a couple of questions to ask you. And you're telling us some fantastic stories. When I ask you this question, what pops in your mind? One of your most memorable experiences with someone reacting to your art?
Oddly enough, the Joe Perry one was a lot of times, I don't mean anything harsh by this, but a lot of times when I'm painting drums and guitars, and like I say, sometimes it's only over the phone and I'm not interfacing with them. And some of the drummers I know really well, some I don't know at all. And I do the drums here, I put them together, I box them up, and I ship them somewhere. A lot of times I never hear anything from them. Most of the time, I should tell you, I don't hear anything. And I got used to the thing of, well, I guess no news is good news. I guess they liked it because I didn't hear anything. And that's pretty kind of the norm. I hate to say it, but I understand that, these guys are busy or whatever. They get these drums and somebody throws them up on stage and they're rehearsing. I don't know, but that's kind of the norm. But when I delivered, because I shipped the guitar to Joe, and he unveiled it at the Gibson factory, because I sent it back to Gibson and they put it together after I had finished the paint job, and they finished it out and put the guitar together. And Joe and his wife he orchestrated the whole thing where they were in Nashville doing like a Gibson guitar factory tour. And at the end of the tour, they arranged to have this guitar set up and light lit and unveil it for both Joe and his wife, Billy. I didn't know this at the time leading up to it, but they did this. It was, she loved it. He loved it. And he called me like that day, and to tell me these things, and that I did a great job, and his wife loved it, and thank you so much, and you should be proud, and because you did, and even though I wasn't in the same room and I didn't get to see her or him reaction to the unveiling, and most of the time I'm not, but he took the time to call me and tell me that story and to thank me. Again, not being particularly money motivated, that sticks out. I don't even remember what I got paid, but I remember him thanking me over the phone and being grateful. So again, because a lot of things that I do for people, whether it's a commissioned canvas or a drum or a guitar, I ship to them, and I'm not there for the unveiling and, the reaction. So again, that's kind of the joy of playing drums. You get an immediate reaction when you hit a cymbal. The noise is there and there's a reaction, and that's the biggest difference for me for art versus playing in a band. The playing in a band is instant gratification, and art, as you know, is can sometimes be hours, days, weeks, years, depending on the project that you're working on before you unveil it and get any kind of reaction from anybody. Now, I love the process of painting, but it's certainly not instant gratification at all. I love the process. So I know that's not a bunch of stories of my memories of the reaction, but just now kind of starting to have gallery shows of my canvases. And so I'm starting to be in the room with them and a lot of times it's the first time I've seen these paintings since I finished them. Because I finish them, I roll them back up and they sit in a corner in my office. So now that to do an art show, obviously I have to get them stretched, and now they're hanging on the wall, and I'm seeing all these paintings that I painted for a few years in various hotel rooms around the world, and I see them all together. So when I'm doing the shows, now I'm in the room with people and I'm getting that reaction, and it's cool. It's a good feeling to see people connect to the images that I paint. So it's nice.
Congratulations, having such a illustrious, long, fantastic career, and you've done so many things, but is there anything you want to accomplish in the future that you haven't accomplished yet?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I could. There has to be, right? That's what keeps us going. I mean, I get asked a lot, oh, what's your favorite painting? And or drum kit, or what's your favorite? I'm like, it's the next one. I mean, they're all my babies. It's difficult for me to choose one or the other. There's certainly some that I connect with more, well, for whatever reason. If it's a painting that I did, maybe I worked for that artist. We didn't touch on the John Bon Jovi thing. So I painted a picture of John while I was on tour with Bon Jovi. So, and that's kind of risky, showing the boss you're painting, because what if he didn't do a good job? What if he doesn't like it? But he was very gracious. He loved it. And he has the original, and he did a limited edition of Giclée prints that he sold directly to his fan club. So he's been very gracious with that. And that's certainly an honor. And he's an icon of many, many decades now. So the consummate performer. So that was cool to be a part of that as well. So it's an honor to be associated with these guys on quite a few levels, so sometimes I'm strictly working for them and they have no idea that I'm an artist. John Bon Jovi had no idea. I'm just a guy working with the drummer. So sometimes I like to fly under the radar, but it's nice when the two come together, and it's always great when your stuff is appreciated, right?
Absolutely. And final question, John. You have experienced so much success, but personally, how do you define success?
I got to think ultimately success it's elusive for sure, because I don't always feel like I'm successful. Even hearing you say that, describing me as a success or a successful career, I'm like, oh, really? I never thought of it that way.
Absolutely.
Truthfully. I mean, so you know how it is. We always look at ourselves differently than the other people. And I try not to get too jaded with, some of the people that I'm associated with or lucky enough to work for or call friends or whatever. So, because I'm still a fan, you know what I mean? It's like I've worked for Van Halen now for 23 years, but I'm a Van Halen fan, man. I was that kid buying the ticket and drawing the picture of them and stuff. So I try never to forget that I am a fan of these people that I paint or sometimes work for. But I think the broad stroke of success is, I think, just being happy with who you are. And I have a family that I'm very fortunate and blessed to be able to take care of, and everybody's healthy and reasonably sane after a COVID lockdown. But I don't think I'm not sure that I'll ever be, I don't want to say satisfied, but I always want to keep striving for, I guess, greater success, but that's not really, I know that's what we're talking about, but I don't know that I would quantify it that way. Trying to get certainly better with my craft and my art, and still want to be a better drummer and a better artist. And I'm certainly still relatively new in the fine art field and working with galleries. And I'd like to be more established in art galleries. And, I just kind of want to keep that focus and keep moving and getting better That's about all. That's enough, right?
That's fantastic, John. And thank you for sharing us your creative journey. And lastly, where can people connect with you again? Or even you mentioned some galleries. If you don't remember those names, or if you can share it with us, that'd be great. If it's in your website, please tell us how we can connect with you again.
Well, I mean, certainly the website is johndouglas.com. The Instagram, which I didn't mention, is johndouglas_art on Instagram. And there's always stuff posted on that. Gallery wise, I've done a few shows since we're kind of opening up. I haven't found a quote unquote like home gallery. I've done like the appearance in a show of like 10 days or whatever, where my canvas is hanging in there. And I am there for like 2 days on the weekend, and we do the full exhibit. So one-man show, which is pretty awesome. So I've done that. I did at the Michael Murphy Art Gallery in Tampa, Florida. I did that a couple months ago, and I'm working on a couple of new ones to get in there. So I don't have anything locked in yet. There's just some stuff in the works. And again, I'm relatively new to this aspect of it, and I'm learning that it's a lot like the music business. It's not easy. But again, we do it because we have to. We do it for the love of the creative process, whether it's art or music. It's all part of the challenge and the journey.
Listeners, make sure you connect with John. If you're a art fan, music fan, take a look at his website, take a look at his Instagram page. And thank you again for sharing your creative journey, John. Until next time, everybody, take care and goodbye.
Thanks, Chris.